welcome back to our next conversation with a guest this month in February, where we're talking about relationships and communication, leadership, and healthy eating and nutrition. And so today's conversation, or this conversation with Lisa, falls into the relationships and communication category. Unfortunately, many folks find themselves in a situation that Lisa is an expert in, where they've got a really not so kind ex-partner. I know Lisa's been there. That's why the name of her business, the business that she and her partner Chris have created, is Been There, Got Out. And she specializes in supporting families or supporting partners who have gone through some pretty ugly stuff. And she's helping them come out the other side of it healthy and happy. So
yes. And remain in the midst of it, hopefully as healthy and unscathed as possible.
Here's hoping, right? And not only just from the parent perspective, but from the kid's perspective as well.
Yep.
And it's telling me, I don't know why, but it's telling me that Facebook doesn't like our conversation. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to have the conversation. And if we need to revisit it or download it or whatever, play it elsewhere, we'll just do it. So Lisa, we're talking about toxic partners who try to brainwash those lovely things we call children, those lovely beings who don't deserve this.
No.
Why does a parent try to brainwash a kid in the first place?
Okay. So my background, all of our community and clients are dealing with getting out of toxic relationships and are in the midst of, or on the other end, after high conflict, divorce, separation, custody battles, and a very difficult co-parenting situation. So this is not normal. This is just 10% of cases that are considered high conflict, but this is all Chris and I deal with. So this is our world. So why do people do this? Well, our clients' exes tend to have some kind of mental issues. We're not going to diagnose. It doesn't matter. We just focus on patterns of behavior. But often when a relationship ends, that person feels a sense of extraordinary abandonment and they can't deal with that. So it turns into a sort of rage at the person who they imagine is creating the situation, even if they contributed or wanted a divorce or separation.
Sure.
And so what they then do is portray themselves as the victim, and their ex, who is our client, is the villain. And they will do everything they can to destroy our client because they can't confront the fact that maybe they failed as a spouse or as a partner. And so when you get out of the day-to-day living together with this person, they are limited to three things. We always say it's money, kids, and the courts. So money and the courts go hand in hand. And when and during and afterwards, the longer lasting pawn are the children. And so many people like that have black and white thinking, it's called, where everything is all or nothing. So as a parent, it's all about winning for that person and it's about loyalty. So basically, the kid is led to believe that if they love that parent, who we'll say is the preferred parent, then they have to reject or discard or hate the other parent, who is called the targeted parent. And that's our clients. So it's a form of domestic violence to try to turn a kid against another parent, but it fits in because that's what they do. It's like the spoils of war. I'm going to take all the money and all the stuff, and I'm going to take the kids too, and I'm going to leave you with nothing and make you poor, and the kids are going to hate you, and everything is your fault. So how dare you live a life without me?
Right. And I know that you've definitely seen that, to your point about the money and the courts going hand in hand, that like the more they can drag you back into court, the more expensive it gets, because you've got attorney's fees and filing fees and all these other fees that add up. And it's a matter of trying to regain control on their end. Yeah.
Well, also, it's not just the fees. I mean, you think of the cost on your life, where it's about the time you take away from your job, the time you take away from parenting, the emotional energy that it costs to deal with all of this. It's a tremendous burden, and it can last for years. It often does last for years.
Okay, so we know why they do it. Often some kind of mental health challenges. Again, neither you nor I, neither of us are diagnosticians. That's just a pattern that you see.
Right.
So then
pattern.
I'm sorry?
it's a very predictable pattern.
That makes sense. Okay, so we know why it happens. How do we know that it's happening? Because I know the folks that I know who've gone through divorce. I mean, you fell in love with this
Right.
person in the first place, right? Like there used to be, we would think, some kind of redeeming quality. And now it's like they've turned into this monster. They're playing the role of victim, but making your client, the targeted client, out to be the villain. How does the targeted client even start to recognize that this is going on? Because this has to be, I mean, ultimately, initially, it must be unexpected behavior to some extent, but then like it just gets so crazy. How do we recognize it?
Okay. So there's something called alienation factor. So alienation is when the parent, and there's different words for it, coercive control or abuse by proxy. But they try to, like I said, like turn the child against the other parents. They do it in a series of ways that we call alienation factors. And this comes from Dr. Amy Baker, whose model is often used to prove a case of how a parent does this in court. But that's a separate issue. Anyway, so one of the ways that they do, and this is like such a big topic. We're actually working on a course on it and stuff because it's so involved. As with anything with relationships, it's complex. But there's really 6 ways that parent tries to brainwash the kids against the other parent. The first is sending poisonous messages about that parent to the child. And the overall theme is that other parent, the target parent, is unsafe, unloving, and unavailable. And so the child will be getting messages, whether overtly or covertly, like that other parent, let's say they left us. So instead of making it like we got a divorce, like the adults got the divorce, it's like that your other parent abandoned us and we are all together in this. And to make that child feel like they are being punished by, the separation. That's part of it. Another thing that a parent will do, which will come through to a child, is they try to erase and replace. So they'll make it like they'll minimize that other parent's role in the child's life. Children rely on their parents for their memories. And so after a separation is when this stuff happens. And one parent will say something like, oh, that other parent was never really there for you. Or they'll do other things, like they'll try to change the child's identity. If they like change their name after a divorce to make it like they can't be part of that other parent's life, they try and take their name away. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that people do. If they have a new partner, they'll insist that the child calls their new partner mommy or daddy, which is not something that anybody likes, including the courts. But that's just a couple of examples. Another thing that they do is they will block contact and communication with the target parent. So this can be like you have your court order, you're supposed to get your time with your kids, and somehow that other parent makes it very difficult. They won't let you have the FaceTime calls that you're supposed to have. They'll schedule activities on your time, so they start chipping away, or they'll just refuse to let you see the child. One thing that comes up often is with a sick child. Normal people, when a child's sick, they'll say, the kid can stay with you, it's no big deal. But in these situations, when a child is sick, that becomes weaponized, where one parent's like, I'm going to take the child if they can get out of bed, and you have to do it. And so there's really nothing about the kid's health. It's more about the power of like, I'm going to take the kid. No, it's my time. No, it's your time. And that can get really, really tricky. And it's important for people to understand what they need to do and what they definitely shouldn't do. Some other things that people do are they undermine your authority. They'll make it like I'm the real parent and the target parent doesn't really count. You're just going for a visit. My rules are everyone's rules, and you can only do what I say, no matter what that other parent says. Encouraging a child to betray the other parent's trust. Older kids in particular, the preferred parent will tell the kid to spy. They'll say, what's going on at the other house? And they'll reward them for coming back with messages. Kids like tweens and teens, often it's awful. They'll like take pictures and send it to the other parent. They'll call and report back to the other parent because they get rewarded But yeah, I mean, this is something most people don't know is happening, and it's huge in our world. It's one of the most common things we deal with. And then the other thing, probably one of the last main factors, is the preferred parent will try to foster dependence in the child. So they'll make it like the child, they want the child to be dependent on them, and they don't encourage the child's independence. So for example, they'll the kid grows up feeling like I can't make a decision, or I can't listen to you, my target parent, because my other parent says I'm not allowed to do that unless they say it's okay. My partner's ex used to lay out the kids' clothing even until they were well into middle school, to be like, you need me to do this for you. Sometimes we hear about parents infantilizing their children because they want the kids to be really reliant on them still. So it's a big topic, but that's some of the things to keep an eye out for.
Wow. And we actually have Kelly White, who's going to be one of our speakers on Thursday as well, just commented when you were talking about like the taking pictures and like reporting back and everything. She was like, yikes. I think that's a pretty good response, right? Like, wow. Like just the weaponizing. I mean, how that's the only way that I can think of it. That's the only term I can think of to use, of like, you're weaponizing your kid.
Yeah. And it's really sad. Like one of our clients mentioned how her teenager would eavesdrop on her, our client has to be a woman, on the mom, and then report back to the dad. She said, I think mom's making more money. And the dad's like, oh, maybe I'll take her back to court. And so our client said to her daughter, why are you doing this? Like, why are you listening to my phone calls and telling your father about this? And her daughter said, well, when I say bad things about you, that's the only time he pays attention to me. So again, we're not dealing with regular people. There's all kinds of dynamics at work, but kids who are stuck in these situations are often rewarded for, again, like bad behavior that shows that it's called a loyalty conflict. So you're siding with me, and if you say bad things about the other parent, you do things to betray their trust, and I'm going to reward you.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So what's that like for the kids? Like, what have you heard? I mean, right, like that's a logical transition, right? When the daughter's like, that's the only time dad pays attention to me. It's the only time that I ever get his attention or anything like that. Like, to the extent that you can speak on the kids' behalf, how does this show up for the kids? Because clearly the preferred parent, not your client, like in our perspective, the villain, right? But like, I'm sure they don't even think about this, but like, we need to be aware on the targeted parent side, the ones who actually seemingly care about the kids, right? What's that like for them?
For the kids? It's really, I mean, first of all, divorce is hard, or separation, or these difficult co-parenting situations are hard on any kids, like because kids blame themselves. No matter what you say, they blame themselves. And so it's really, really hard for them. But it's even harder when because kids tend to love both their parents.
Right.
Even in abusive situations, they want to love both their parents. We want to believe that our parents love us unconditionally, and we want a relationship with both our parents, and we've been living with both parents. And so when there's a split, and then one parent is saying these things or making the kid believe these things, the child gets confused, because we think our parents are authorities, and we think our parents tell us the truth. So when one parent is sending messages about the other parent, the child experiences something called cognitive dissonance, where like this parent's telling me something, so I want to believe them, but then I go back to the other parent and they're telling me the opposite, and I don't really know who to believe, and I don't really know how to feel. And one thing with a preferred parent or an abusive parent is everything they do is often, for a child, that is often filtered through their own needs. So children are not allowed to have their own feelings, experiences, opinions, anything, because kids in these situations learn what they need to do to get by.
Right. Survival.
Right. And it's called fawning. So we often talk about fear, fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And fawn is a survival mechanism. Like, what do I need to do to get through this? And so children in these situations often learn to become people pleasers, because they see one parent needs certain things. And unfortunately, on some unconscious level, they realize that that love might be conditional. But even though I feel horrible, I'm going to turn against my safe parent or healthy or targeted parent because they can take it and they're going to be there for me, but I have to deal with this now. And it's really hard, especially for teens and tweens. Clarissa, I'm watching your face. I'm like, I wonder what's going on in that head.
Well, because part of what I was thinking back was, to your point of like divorce being challenging for kids, it's actually listed. And I was going back, there was a study that was done that you can find more information about on the CDC's website about adverse childhood effects. And divorce is one of them. Others, and I was trying to find the list of them as we were talking, but other lists include abuse and like other traumatic experiences. And a lot of folks don't realize that even in the most amicable of divorces, it's still such a shift in their experience of life that it is traumatic in and of itself. And then we add all this other stuff on, which is why I know you're so passionate about what you do, because this just takes that experience that is already so challenging for everyone involved. And 99% of the time, maybe even 100% of the time, I don't know the statistics, the kids have very little, if anything, to do with the actual dissolution of the marriage.
Right. And think about it. The kids are affected the most because I can get away from my ex. I can have my own place and my new life and whatever. But the kids, their lives change. Now they're packing up their stuff all the time, going back and forth between two homes. Their schedules completely change. The whole dynamic in the home changes. People find new partners. It's just like chaos for them. And they have siblings, and there's all kinds of things to navigate. And one of the most important things for kids is consistency, stability, and routine. That's been completely disrupted.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a sense of why they do it in the first place, often from a mental health perspective, a need to regain control, all that jazz. We talked about how to know when it's happening. You gave us a lot of really good, terrifying, frankly, examples of things to look for. And just quite frankly, it sounds like the hell it creates for the kids, right?
Yeah.
Do you notice any differences, or have there been any studies done on the impacts of this kind of behavior when the kids are younger versus when the kids are older? Like, when do we notice that do we know when it becomes more problematic? Is it like if the family divorces when the kids are younger, or does it show up later? Is there any kind of insight on that?
I don't know that many details, but I know that, okay, so this kind of behavior, keep in mind that whenever people split, there's always bitterness. And there's times when people make comments about their ex to the kids, and that's normal. Like, that's just how we are. I'm talking about, in these situations, there is a steady stream of negativity with no positive message about so this is not just general divorce stuff. This is, again, like super high conflict, like an abusive situation. Not every child who is exposed to this will have the same response. So it's not really about age. Like, some of it depends on the relationship between the kids and each parent, how susceptible they are. Supposedly kids that are more anxious are way more susceptible to it. Prolonged custody battles and litigation make children more susceptible to it. The nature of the particular parent's needs, it depends on how extreme it is. So it's not always the age. It's sort of like the child's experience and how much support they have, and there's so many factors. So it's really hard to say. Yeah. I mean, sometimes adult children are used, little kids, toddlers, I have to say, are less apt to succumb to it because they don't remember anything. They're so little. It's like they're like, they can hear all kinds of messages. They go and they just like, you drop them off at like a preschool when they're really little, and they scream and cry, and then they get over it and they forget, so it's different.
Well, and they're also, at least at that age, and this isn't to say that this couldn't change as they get older, right? Like, they're less to the point of, like, they don't remember things. They also don't have cell phones. Like, they can't text. Right? They can't take pictures. They don't have the cognitive awareness of, oh, mom just got a raise at work, I'm going to go tell dad.
Right.
and they don't necessarily have the vocabulary yet to be able to articulate, oh, I'm doing this because it's the only time that my father pays attention to me, like
Yeah.
the daughter of your client indicated. So it makes sense that they would be less likely to be pawns, at least at that age. And again, that's not to say that can't change as they get older, right?
Right. You're reminding me of something, actually, one of our clients and we have seen this with really little kids. Her ex would drive past the old home that they used to live in and say to their child, see, that's where we all used to be a family, and mommy didn't want that anymore. So the kid came back and was like, Mom, why did you do this? And that's like dealing with all that is really hard.
Got it. So you made a couple of comments earlier about like things that we shouldn't be doing, or that the targeted parent, like what are some of the mistakes that they can make, probably well intentioned, but
Of
that
course.
either can land us in some legal challenges or just excuse me, make the situation worse.
Okay. So one thing that is a big no-no legally and just in general is you don't want to bring your kids into the legal conflict. You don't want to share details about the court case. Often in any kind of court situation, sometimes in writing or not, but a judge will make it clear, lawyers make it clear, you do not involve your kids in, as much as possible, sharing information about litigation, because that can really harm kids, and kids worry and they don't really understand. So it's important to be like, that's between us. We're working it out. But it's harder with older kids because they eavesdrop and they know, and they'll ask and stuff. So it really depends on the situation. But one thing that a lot of people do without meaning to is they'll hear, so their ex will say something, the preferred, unhealthy parent will say something to the child. The child comes back and says, Mommy, Daddy said this about you. And then the instinct is, no, that's not true. I need to tell you the truth of what it is.
Mhm.
What, like I said before, children think that their parents don't lie to them. So one parent is saying, this is the truth. When you are saying this is not the truth, you're basically doing the same thing that the other parent is doing. You're telling the child what to think and what to believe. You're not respecting their own opinions and thoughts. And they don't care what the truth is. They don't care. They want to be left alone. They want to be kept out of it. They want you to comfort them, but they're not interested in the truth and the details. So that's a big mistake that people make.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it strikes me that they want the security of just knowing that they're going to have a home, and they
Right.
don't, again, they don't have the capacity to articulate this, but they don't want to be used as pawns, because really, who does?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Another mistake is and this again, it's so hard. It takes a lot of work. All of our clients need a lot of support, but the kid comes back, says something that the other parent either has said, or comes back and kind of is mimicking the body language, or they remind our clients of their ex. And our clients like, I got rid of my ex, my toxic ex, and now my kid is turning into like a mini me of them. And I don't like it. And so we have to remember that kids are also victims in these situations. Kids are victims of this type of domestic violence. Just like we as adults were manipulated for so long, we couldn't see the truth. Like the kids can't see the truth either. And so we need to learn how to recognize our own triggers. And it's so hard when the kids are coming and it's like, oh my gosh, there's my ex right there. Like, I don't want to deal with this. To just be like, I need to pause. They're dealing with a lot too, and they're confused. And I have to recognize my triggers, and I cannot just get mad at them and say, just get away from me. And you're just like your father, you're just like your mother. Like that's really harmful.
And I was going to say that right there. I mean, whatever your own triggers are, or your own story, your own perspective, right? Like verbalizing, you're just like blah de blah. I mean, even in an amicable situation where it's clear that you don't like this other person, when you're like, oh, you're just like them, or
they're half
that doesn't do
of each
any
of
good.
you. Yeah, they're half of
Right.
each of you.
Right.
So yeah, that doesn't help.
Okay. So we've got some really good insight here, and hopefully folks are going to walk away with some understandings of like why we're dealing with this in the first place. And I like the fact that you pointed out that if you are the targeted parent, identifying that you fell into that same pattern of being victimized as being manipulated along the way, right? I mean, I haven't been there. I'm grateful. So I can't understand that. Right. But recognizing like, hey, the marriage fell apart for whatever reasons, and the kid isn't the only one who was on the receiving end of this behavior. So recognizing that we as the adults have the fully formed prefrontal cortex, and we're still challenging, or we're still finding challenge in the ways that we deal with this. The kids don't have that benefit yet, and they're getting the same kind of treatment and can't see the truth and can't navigate it in the same way because their brain just isn't developed enough to do it.
Right.
So,
and that's also like getting the truth to them. Like they're not going to perceive it in the way you want them to.
Right. And I mean, that's maybe not something for decades down the road when there's less acrimony and more frontal lobe development for them, potentially down the road, but maybe not ever. So, all right. So we've gotten some good information. So what we're going to do is we're going to round out this part of the conversation, and Lisa and I are going to pop over into the Parent Tween Village, which is where we're going to talk about some steps that folks can take to handle things even more effectively. Like we've talked about the whys, the wherefores, how the kids feel about it, and what not to do. The last part of our conversation is expressly for members of Parent Tween Village, which if you haven't joined yet, you can get information on that, parenttweenconnection.com/Parent Tween Village. But we are going to round out here. Before we do, Lisa, how can people find you and give them a quick overview of what you do and how you support them?
Okay, super easy to find us. Just look up Been There Got Out. We have our website, beentheregotout.com. We're on Instagram of @BeenThereGotOut with little underscores. We're on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, X. We're everywhere.
All the places.
All the places. Just look up Been There Got Out. Super easy. So Chris and I, like I said, help people dealing with high conflict relationships, divorce, separation, custody battles, and co-parenting hell have the chance of the best outcome in family court and beyond. We fill in a lot of the gaps that therapists and lawyers don't do. We specialize in something called legal abuse, and that's dealing with people who weaponize the legal system to try to wear you down and bleed you dry financially. And of course, what they do with the kids as well. We have a weekly legal abuse support group. We do one-to-one coaching. We're developing a big online course. This topic on what to do when your ex tries to brainwash the kids against you in court and in life is the topic of our current book, and also a bigger course that I'm working on now with a child development expert. I'm really passionate about it. I think there's definitely things you can do. So there's hope, but realize that you're not the only one, not you particularly, Clarissa, but there's many people. There are so many people going through this, and they're just like domestic violence. There's a lot of shame associated with it. People feel like, oh my gosh, my kid doesn't talk to me and everyone must think I'm a terrible parent. Absolutely not. This is standard stuff for victims of domestic violence, and we can get into that after.
Awesome. All right, everybody. If you're interested in the next part of the conversation, we are going live here momentarily, but you can absolutely join Parent Tween Village and catch the replay. So Lisa, thank you as always. I'm excited for the next part of our conversation.
Me too. See you soon.